Hey friends, it's me, Em again, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things sinister. If you're interested in true crime, or if you like all things horror related, hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can join me for some morbid conversation. All right, friends, welcome to what I'm going to consider to be my holiday episode. I'm recording this a few days before Christmas. I'm hoping to get it edited and pieced together. That way you can have it slightly before Christmas, if not right around Christmas Day. And originally, with it being a holiday episode, my original game plan was to do like an M is for Mary kind of thing, where maybe we took a case that started out kind of dark but ended up having a happy ending, like a missing persons case where the person was found alive and well. I instead picked a story that actually it does take place right around the holidays, right around Christmas, but it definitely doesn't have a happy ending. If anything, this case is more like, I don't know, M is for messed up rather than anything else. What I can tell you is if you have no previous experience or knowledge of this case, the ending is definitely going to catch you off guard. I know it did me. And with that being said, today's chat is going to be about Ryan Waller. So, as I said, this story takes place during the holidays, specifically right around Christmas time. And specifically on December 23rd, that's when Ryan's girlfriend, Heather Kwan, would go over to Ryan's house for an evening night in, an easy night together. The two ordered pizza and they were just going to hang out and watch a movie together. On December 24th, nobody really heard from the couple, but that's not really unusual. You know, I go days without talking to certain people. It's not weird just to go one day without speaking to someone. However, the couple did have plans to meet up with Ryan's dad on Christmas Day that night for dinner, and the family was going to have Christmas dinner together. Ryan's dad began to get a little leery and began to get a little suspicious when Ryan wasn't answering any phone calls, Ryan wasn't answering any text messages, and eventually, Ryan and his girlfriend missed family dinner with no call, no show, no nothing. This was very much unlike Ryan. His dad has said that, his son wouldn't have just gone extended time without contacting him, especially when they had plans to meet. So Ryan's dad went over to the home and knocked on the door, and no one answered. So his dad called the police department and asked for them to do a welfare check. The police didn't immediately respond, but he was told that somebody would get back to him, and a few hours later, someone did. They met the police at Ryan's home. Police knocked on the door. There was no answer. Police had started to look into the windows and through the blinds, and they had noted that they thought that they had seen a body. They didn't immediately go in. They asked Ryan's family to, step back. And they had sent in for a warrant to try to enter the home, which doesn't even make sense. During a wellness check, if you have a probable reason why you should be able to enter the home, police are allowed to enter the home. If a police officer is looking through the window and sees a body and nobody's responding to the door, that is enough cause for them to attempt to enter the residence. That's how wellness checks work. If they couldn't do that, if they had to wait on a warrant, then wellness checks don't really make any sense. What if if they saw somebody laying on the floor, passed out from a heart attack or whatever, that person's going to be dead by the time the warrant comes through. But that's how they did it this time. They waited for a warrant. When it came through and when police finally decided that they were going to enter the home, they tried to break into the home without breaking down the door. They were trying to pick the lock. They were trying to get in through that way. During this whole ordeal, Ryan actually came to the door. He heard the noise. He heard what was going on. And so Ryan responded and he came to the door. When he answered the door, Ryan looked rough. He had a noticeable black eye. He had a little bit of bleeding on his face. He He looks rough. I'll show you a picture. In my opinion, he looked a little bit rough. But the way he was talking, the way he was responding, I guess it led police to believe that there was no real reason why he should be ignoring his family. I mean, he looked rough, but I guess what I'm saying is he wasn't passed out, he wasn't overdosed, he was responsive. Police then let Ryan know that they were there to do a welfare check on him and his girlfriend. Ryan resisted a little bit and said that his girlfriend was sleeping on the couch, and by this point I believe it was like the middle of the night. But after a little bit, he did end up letting the police enter the home. When police entered the home, they did see his girlfriend, Heather Kwan, lying on the couch. But when they approached her, it was obvious that the 21-year-old was not sleeping. She had a gunshot wound to her head, and she was dead. At that point, Ryan was led out in handcuffs. He was put into a police car. He was told to wait there. And they would bring in backup. They would bring in like the forensic team, paramedics to confirm that Heather was in fact dead, the whole 9 yards. Ryan ended up waiting in the back of that police car for several hours, 4 to 6 hours from my understanding. So after a few hours of waiting in the back of the police car, Ryan's actually taken to the police station where he is photographed, his injuries are photographed, and he is put in an interrogation room. In the interrogation room, he waits for a few minutes before police officers get there. He actually ends up handcuffing himself to the table, I guess to save the police officers the trouble, and he waits for them to come in to start the interrogation. When they do start the interrogation, Ryan acts confused. He seems disoriented. His story is all over the place. It doesn't seem to line up. He changes his story frequently. He changes his words frequently. He doesn't even seem to know the answer to basic questions. It's very bizarre the way he is acting in this room. You can see the detective who's interviewing him grow more and more frustrated. I mean, Ryan's not even giving him a straight answer on as far as how much education he's completed. He can't get out of Ryan whether he graduated high school or didn't graduate high school, whether he has his GED or doesn't have his GED. Ryan's just all over the place during this interrogation.
You know why you're down here, Ryan? You have no idea why you're down here?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Ryan, I'm gonna read you something so you could understand because I don't know what happened, okay? So I'm going to read you something to make sure you understand your rights, okay? Basically, I'm going to read you. You've seen Cops before, right? Ever seen a TV show Cops or CSI or anything like that?
Okay.
You ever seen that?
No.
You've never seen any kind of cop show? Lawyer show? Any kind of show?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to listen up real close now. Okay, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can't be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to the presence of an attorney to assist you prior to questioning and be with you during questioning if you so desire. If you cannot afford an attorney, you have the right to have an attorney appointed for you prior to questioning. Do you understand these rights?
Yes.
Yes? What's the highest grade you went through school?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know the highest grade you went through?
8th?
8th grade? Did you graduate?
Yeah.
Do you have a GED?
I don't know.
You don't know what?
I don't know. I don't know. I just want to go home.
Oh, you're not going to go home right now.
So what?
What's the highest grade that you completed?
B?
Not grade, as in letter grade. I'm asking, did you graduate high school?
No.
And the highest you went was 8th grade?
Yep.
Do you know how to read and write, Ryan?
Yeah.
Do you have a girlfriend?
Mm.
No? You know a girl named Heather?
Mm-hmm.
You know Heather's last name?
Mm-hmm.
What is Heather's last name?
The one that lives there right now?
I guess, I don't know. If her name's Heather, what's her last name?
I don't know which name she's trying to use as her last one. She's trying to have a real last as her nickname, so I don't know.
What nickname does she go by?
She probably wants the last name, Kyman.
Kyman? How would you spell that? With a K or a C?
K?
Keep going.
I don't know.
How old is Heather?
16 or 17.
Is she a white girl?
Yeah.
How did you meet Heather?
I've known her since school.
Okay.
I don't know.
You just known her from school?
She used to be a business name. I don't know.
She used to do a business name.
She used to be in my book named with business name.
Oh, okay. She used to be in the class, your business class?
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, the officer goes in and does mention Ryan's injuries and mentions his black eye. And Ryan says at one point that maybe Heather did it. Now, you can tell, if you watch the full interrogation, you can tell that the detective thinks that Ryan is guilty of killing Heather. You can tell that he is trying to get a confession out of Ryan. If you've watched enough police interrogation videos like I have, you can tell that that is that officer's end goal during this interrogation. And so, likewise, you can tell when Ryan says that maybe his black eye is from Heather hitting him, the detective is going to take that information and run with it. Like, maybe she hit him in self-defense while she was trying to fight him off from being shot with the gun. You can tell that he thinks that that bit of information is more evidence that Ryan committed this crime. And so he leans into that information. Now, like every other question that Ryan is answered during this interview, his answer to that also changes. And he says it was someone else who hit him. And then he changes it to someone else who hit him. It does not stay consistent that he thinks his black eye is from Heather. Like I said, all over the place. No clear-cut story from Ryan.
What happened to your face?
I don't know.
You told the officer just a few minutes ago that someone hit you. Do you remember who hit you?
I don't know. I think it was Heather.
Why would Heather hit you?
I don't know. It was an accident. I forgot why.
What was an accident?
Heather's last name?
No. What was an accident?
Heather hitting me.
What did she hit you with?
Her hand in the eye.
Did you guys have an argument?
Not really, no.
Not really?
Uh-uh.
What happened for her to hit you in the eye like that?
She just hit me on accident. She was giving Christina a head.
She was what?
She was helping Christina with her hair or something. I don't know.
Who's Christina?
She's on the couch.
Christina's on the couch?
Now, as the interview continues, like I said, you can see this detective grow progressively more and more frustrated with Ryan just trying to keep his answers making some sort of sense. And at one point, Ryan starts to hit consistency with one point. And that one point is mentioning a man named Richie and Richie's dad. Once he hones in on the name Richie and Richie's dad, those two characters stay consistent throughout his story. Now, details regarding Richie and Richie's dad, those do change. But once Ryan brings up the name Richie and Richie's dad, he remains consistent with those two throughout the rest of his interrogation. Now, at first, he goes and says that Richie and his dad had brought bow and arrow. When the police officers ask who Richie is, Ryan says he used to live here. The police officer asks him, "So he was your roommate?" And Ryan says, "Yeah." We know now that that is not true. Richie was never Ryan's roommate. Richie had lived in that home before Ryan had moved in, but had moved out before Ryan moved in. So he was a previous tenant, but they never lived there at the same time. But just like all of other Ryan's questions and answers, he said, "Yeah, he was my roommate." But he said so in a way that was so confused. There's no better way to say it. He was confused. Eventually, the story of Richie and his dad circles from the black eye and bow and arrows to the point that now he claims that Richie and his dad had revolvers and that Richie and his dad had shot him and Heather. At which point, the detective, who is already over Ryan's story, he's already frustrated with dealing with Ryan by this point, blows him off. And the reason why he blows him off is he says, "If you had been shot in the way that you are telling me you had been shot, you would not be here talking to me. You would be dead." Ryan says, "I don't know what to tell you, but that's what I'm telling you."
You're telling me you're all over the board here, number one. You're saying bows and arrows, you're saying revolvers, and you're saying some other thing, and you're saying they shot you in the eye, okay? They shot you with a revolver in your eye.
Yes, and that's
Is it a BB gun?
No, it was a real gun, man. It was just a
If
revolver.
they shot you in the eye with a revolver, you wouldn't be talking to me right now.
How do you know?
It was most likely you'd be dead.
That's what I thought too, man. I really don't know.
Now, as we get to the end of the interview, every prompt that the detective gives Ryan by this point, Ryan just answers with, "I don't know." And every time he says, "I don't know," he gets more and more defeated sounding. And toward the end, he just keeps saying he doesn't know. He wants to go home. He wants to sleep. Now, finally, after some back and forth between the detective and Ryan, you can see the detective lean in. He grabs Ryan's face and kind of pulls him closer, to which Ryan says, "Ow, I'm hurting." His face is quite obviously banged up. And the detective looks at him real good. And the detective leaves the room. And he leaves the room because at that point, he learns that Ryan might not be lying.
Richie shot his own sister.
Yes, I swear. That's it.
Sit down.
Not me.
And you've been shot in the eye.
Yes. That's it.
Put your feet up on the table, please.
My feet hurt, man. I don't know why.
Get them off my table. Let me see your nose. Come on, put your legs down. Put your legs down. Bring your face closer.
Oh, my head hurts.
Okay. Yeah, be right back.
So what the detective ended up seeing when he leaned in and looking at Ryan and really looking at the wounds on his face was he saw a possible 4 wounds that could be tied to bullet wounds, possible 2 entry, 2 exit. Main ones are right near his nose, which you can see in the picture. The detective would end up bringing in a representation from the fire department. He would bring in representatives from the fire department to look at Ryan's face for like a secondary opinion, after which Ryan would be taken to the hospital. The fire department would have him stand up and say, "Hey, we are going to the hospital. It looks like you've been shot in the face." Now, when he arrived at the hospital, Ryan would end up having to have emergency surgery. He did, in fact, get shot point blank in the face twice. However, he would not be able to get his surgery immediately because he had developed an infection in his face, mainly from where the bullets had entered, like I said, right through that sinus area. And so he had to be given antibiotics to wait for the infection to clear before he'd be okay for surgery. But after a couple of days, he did get his surgery, in which point they actually ended up removing a large portion, a good chunk of his brain. They removed both of his eyes for surgery, but his right eye would be able to be saved and be put back in, and he would be able to have vision from that eye going forward. His left eye, however, he would lose that for the rest of his life. Like, it would be gone. Now, it wouldn't be until Ryan was in the hospital after spending hours in the police car and then again an hour or more in the interrogation room that Ryan's dad would actually be contacted again to let them know the status of his son. He didn't even know his son was arrested. So he would be contacted from the hospital. He would respond. He would go to the hospital, and it was there he learned the extent of his son's injuries. So oddly enough, not only would his son have like a shattered orbital area from where the bullet had entered into his head and obviously broken skull, brain damage, bleeding on the brain, all that severity going on up here from being shot in the face. But Ryan would also have a broken jaw. And his dad asked the surgeon what caused his jaw to be broken. And the surgeon confirmed it was not from the gunshot wound. And so his dad ended up doing a little digging, and he deduces, based on the way the police report was written and what the surgeon says, it seems as though Ryan's jaw was broken actually during his apprehension when he was being restrained on the ground and put handcuffs on, which breaks my heart. I mean, this whole case breaks my heart. But here this kid's been shot in the face, and he's being manhandled on the ground enough to break his jaw, which is right here in the face area where he has been freshly shot. It's horrible. It's an absolutely horrible case and a horrible handling. So it's his dad's opinion, and if we're being honest, it's my opinion too, that this was an excessive use of force, especially since Ryan wasn't armed at all when they met him. And even if they thought that he was the one responsible for killing Heather, he didn't come to the door aggressively. He didn't come to the door with a gun, and it just seems a little excessive that his jaw would be broken. But I wasn't there, and we can only speculate. So now that we know that Ryan is actually a victim in this crime and not the one who killed his girlfriend, we can kind of piece the story together based off of testimonials at trial, confessions, Ryan's own spotty memory, as well as the memory from his roommate and a couple other acquaintances of Ryan. And the story goes like this. Richie Carver was a former tenant of that residence. But like I said before, he had moved out before Ryan had moved in. And now Ryan was living there with a friend. Richie had decided once Ryan moved in to burglarize the home. And he recruited his dad to help him do that. Why they picked Christmas Day, I'm unsure. It could be that they maybe suspected nobody was going to be home that day. It could be because they thought they'd be able to get more stuff, maybe like Christmas presents that Ryan and Heather had received. It's unsure, but they picked Christmas Day to burglarize the home. Now, when you look this up online, you'll get mixed answers. Some reports will say that this happened on the 23rd, and some reports will say the 25th. And here's where the discrepancy is. The police department, in their reporting, says the burglary and the shooting happened on the 23rd. The coroner, who issued the time of death for Heather, says that it was likely on the 25th. The surgeon at the hospital that Ryan was taken to also said that the wounds on his face do not look like wounds that had happened a few days earlier. They looked fresh. You can see on the bridge of his nose. I mean, it's not even scabbing. He's got dried blood that's going down his face. I mean, it looks fresh. So the surgeon doesn't think that it happened on the 23rd. They also think that it happened on the 25th. The roommate, Ryan's roommate, based off of her memory and based off of what she was aware of, she thinks it happens on the 25th. Ryan, once he kind of got stabilized and once he was able to give more testimonial and have the relief in his brain after surgery, he thinks it happened on the 25th. Speculation, and this is alleged. It seems to be that the police department claims it's the 23rd to kind of cover their ass. And what I mean by that is if it had happened on the 23rd, then that means the time from when it happened until the time Ryan had gotten into the hospital, there was already a wide gap of time where he had bleeding on the brain, at which point they could argue that what's an extra 6 hours? That sounds awful. But when you're talking about it's already been 2 days that he's been walking around with a bullet in his brain, what's an extra 6 hours? It is important to know that if it happened on the 25th, like the surgeon says it likely did, like the coroner says it likely did, like Ryan says it did, like Ryan's roommate says it did, if it happened on the 25th and police got a hold of him early that morning on the 26th, if he had immediate care, his outcome could have been drastically different. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been drastically different. When you have a bullet in your brain and you have bleeding on your brain and swelling in your brain, time is of the essence. You know what I mean? Like, time is of the essence. But that's where the discrepancy comes from. The official reports from the police department say the 23rd, but a lot of other people say the 25th. So take that what you will. I'm just reporting what I have found. And what I have found has shown those discrepancies, and that is my opinion on why I think those discrepancies are the way they are. So anyway, these two men approached Ryan's back door, and it's one of those sliding back doors, and they were going to attempt to break in through that sliding back door. Ryan heard them and met them at the door and attempted to keep them from breaking in, at which point one of them stuck their arm in and shot Ryan point blank in the face. After that, they stepped over Ryan. They proceeded to the living room. They shot Heather in the face, killed instantly. She was dead on impact. After which, the two burglarized the home and they left thinking that they had left no witnesses. They left thinking everybody was dead. It wasn't until after they left that Ryan came to, at which point he thought Heather was just sleeping on the couch because at this point he's got a bullet in his brain. Obviously, his cognitive function isn't ideal. He just begins to fill his time wandering around. He rests. He tries not to wake Heather up. He's very concerned about her getting her rest on the couch. And that's basically what he does. He ambles around until he hears the police attempting to get into his home for a welfare check. Richie was convicted in June of 2008 for felony murder, burglary, aggravated assault, and misconduct involving weapons. His sentence ended in him being sentenced to serve out his natural life in prison. So Larry's case was originally dismissed, and that was because a large portion of his case was centered around the fact that Larry had confessed to his wife at the time, Cheryl, and had given her explicit details both on the burglary and on the murder. And she took that information to the police, and she gave that information freely to the police. However, a few months later, when it came time to testify, she invoked marital privilege and she refused to testify against her husband. Because of that, the families, namely Heather's family, fought so hard and ultimately ended up passing something that was called Heather's Law. They fought for legislation on this, and they ended up getting them to pass something in the state of Arizona called Heather's Law. And what Heather's Law says is that if a spouse gives information to the police freely, like Cheryl had turned over information on her husband and on the confession, and it wasn't under duress, she came to the police and gave that information freely. Since she did that, what this law would say is that that information can be used in court for her to testify against her husband. However, his case had already been dismissed. After the law was passed, though, there was some back and forth, but ultimately, after this back and forth, they agreed to retroactively apply this law to this case. And that led to Larry being reindicted in November of 2011. And what he was reindicted for was first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, burglary, and aggravated assault. The jury found him guilty on all charges, and he was also sentenced to natural life, serving out the rest of his life in prison. Now, as for Ryan, he did end up ultimately surviving his brain surgery. Like I said, they had to remove quite a bit of his brain. They had to remove his left eye, but he survived the surgery, and he would suffer from this injury for the rest of his life. He would have seizures frequently and pretty violently. His dad even noted one time where he had bitten off a big portion of his tongue during one of these seizures. And ultimately, and very, very unfortunately, one of these seizures would ultimately take Ryan's life on January 20th, 2016, about 10 years after the attack. Ultimately, since the seizures were caused from the brain injury from being shot, if it were to be pursued, it is highly likely that both Richie and Larry could be found guilty for his death, for his murder. But since they were already serving life, natural life in prison, that's not being pursued because they're already there. There's no parole. They will die in prison. And it's just not worth it to drag up a trial when they're already maxed out. I'll tell you guys, this one, the first time I saw this video, I didn't know the big reveal at the end. I didn't know. But I have watched this interrogation video to prepare this video multiple times. I have it saved on my computer because I'm cutting pieces of it together to go in to this video. And I tell you, it has been very hard on me to watch it. And I encourage you, now that you know, to go and watch it again, maybe even see if you can find the entire interrogation video, because it is heartbreaking when you know what the story actually is. Watching him just sound so defeated at the end, and hearing him say just on repeat, I don't know. my heart just shatters for him. And it makes me so sad to know that he was a victim this whole time, and was a victim that would ultimately end up losing his life to this. And to see the way that he was treated because he was assumed to be guilty. This is a very unfortunate case of judging something a little too quickly and sticking to your guns, and not seeing beyond that scope, not seeing beyond what you've predetermined the story to be. It makes you wonder how the outcome could have been different had he been checked out. And I think one of the things that hit me the hardest about this is I usually take about a week, 5 to 7 days to research and write my script before I sit down and I actually start to film. So I have watched so many videos. I have read so many articles about this case. I've looked through pictures. Like I said, I've watched the interrogation video multiple times. And it wasn't until today, like literally, I'm watching this particular video as I'm getting my camera and everything set up, that I found out that obviously, and I say obviously, but I didn't make this connection until literally just now before filming this. They had paramedics on site to check to make sure Heather really was dead. And Ryan was there in the police car. Like I said, he was there in the police car while they were doing all this stuff, and bringing these forensic teams out. And not once did they say, hey, this guy looks rough. Can you look him over real quick before they left? They checked Heather out and then they just left. And Ryan had zero medical attention until he went to the hospital. And even the detective that was interviewing him had mentioned to him, dude, you should go to the doctor for that. During the interrogation, had mentioned that to Ryan.
You should go.
Me?
Yeah.
Why? That?
Yeah.
Is it bad?
But nobody gave this poor boy any medical attention until he had already had bleeding on his brain for several hours. I never know how to end these. I mean, I don't want to say it's been fun. These stories are rarely, if ever, fun. They're definitely interesting. I definitely think that they need to be seen and they need to be heard. But whew, what a sombering experience, and what a story. Anyway, on a final note and a much brighter note, I hope the winter season is treating you well. I hope if you choose to celebrate any holidays during these winter months, I hope you are enjoying them. I hope that they are happy and full of family and full of love. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, to cover all the bases. Whatever you celebrate, or even if you don't, I hope you are having a good winter season.